I'm tired of all the belly aching. This is a great Super Bowl matchup, and I'll tell you why on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready. Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, the mastermind Ross Jackson. On today's episode, Ross is going to tell us who the finalists for the New Orleans Saints head coaching job are. Also, we're going to talk about where the Bills and Commanders go from here, but we'll start with this fantastic, that's right, I said fantastic, Super Bowl 59 matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. Before we dive into it, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day, and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Ross, like I said, I love this Super Bowl matchup.
And I think you're wrong. I wanted the stories, Tyler. I wanted the stories.
Fair enough. Classic journalist view of it. I want the narratives. I want the stories. Fair enough. But I'll allow my guy, Chris Clark from Locked On Chiefs, to set the scene.
Tell me if you've heard this before. The Chiefs are headed back to the Super Bowl. And actually, tell me if you've heard this before. The Chiefs are headed back to the Super Bowl to play the Philadelphia Eagles. Hey! Sounds familiar. We were just here a couple years ago, and everything I remember about that game was the Eagles are going to run over the Chiefs. This is the Eagles have a fantastic team, and I don't want to talk about that Super Bowl too much, but the parallels are already there. Everybody's talking about how the Eagles just manhandled the Commanders, and we're going to talk about this Chiefs-Bills game. But the point is this sets up just like it did a couple of seasons ago.
It surely does set up just like it did a couple of seasons ago. And let me remind everybody, we got an excellent Super Bowl. Last time these two teams played, it was an incredibly exciting game with big plays and big moments and big players doing big things. Like, I don't get the crybabying. I just can't take it. This is a great football team against maybe the best quarterback that we've ever seen. Potentially, It's still possible. Like, I know that it's the same as it was 2 years ago, but why are we mad about two great teams playing each other? That's what you want.
You know what it is, Tyler? It's the radio phenomenon. A really, really good song can be a really, really good song, but once you've heard it too many times, what happens? It gets played out. The Kansas City Chiefs are played out, man. People don't want to hear it. People don't want to watch it. People don't want to see it anymore. They want the new story. The Buffalo Bills were supposed to be the new story, the team that's been in the Super Bowl drought. Washington Commanders, team that's been in a Super Bowl drought. Opportunity for both of them to potentially change their course. You get the rookie quarterback. You get Josh Allen, all this other stuff. The stories, the narratives. Yeah, it's a journalistic approach, but I think it was the NFL general fan approach. People just got past the Tom Brady-ness of the dominating dynastic, kind of situation that he had created with the New England Patriots, carried over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now everybody's got to sit through it again with Patrick Mahomes. It's played out, man. Everybody's tired of the same old song.
Ross, some songs don't get played out. And you know what they're called? They're called classics, my man.
I got 5 on
Patrick Mahomes is a classic. Okay, listen. So I guess it's the football purist in me that
you want the best matchup, right?
I love the history. That's what I love about it. I love the potential for a three-peat. I want to be able to put my grandkids on my knee and tell them, young whippersnapper, I saw Patrick Mahomes. I saw the only three-peat in NFL history. You ain't ever going to see nothing like that. Back in my day, they made them better. You know what I mean? Like, I want that. I don't care how petty it is. And I'll tell you, for consistency purposes, when Brady was kind of finishing up his run, I just started here with the network. But even then, I said, hey, I want Tom Brady to win the Super Bowl. I want to see the history. He's the greatest player in NFL history. I want to be the guy who experienced all of that. I don't want people to tell me that Joe Montana was better and I didn't get to see it. No, I got to see it. You didn't. It was my generation. It was my time. I saw Kobe. I saw MJ. I saw LeBron. I saw Tom Brady. I saw Patrick Mahomes. So call it petty, call it selfish, whatever you want. But I want to see the three-peat for that reason. And I want Kansas City to win the game. But also, Saquon Barkley might be having the best running back season in the history of the NFL.
Ever.
And not only that, but Jalen Hurts is a big-time clutch performer, and he has been throughout his entire football existence. And Louie, my guy Louie, who was on the show with me yesterday from Locked On Eagles, he talked about how, Saquon, but Jalen Hurts.
Saquon Barkley might have been the reason the Philadelphia Eagles made it to the NFC Championship, but Jalen Hurts is the reason they're going to play in the Super Bowl. I'm Louie DiBiase, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast. The Eagles put up 55 points on the Washington Commanders to punch their ticket to the Super Bowl, the second time they've done that in the last 3 years, and a huge reason for both of those appearances is QB1. Jalen Hurts heard the critics all week long. He heard all the praise for Jaden Daniels. He showed the league how special he is when things are clicking on all cylinders. 20 of 28 today, 246 passing yards and a touchdown, no turnovers. He had 3 rushing touchdowns. This was Jalen at his ceiling, and now, what do the critics have left to say about this quarterback? The discussion should be no longer, can Jalen Hurts win a championship? It should be, is Jalen Hurts the greatest Eagles quarterback of all time? He's got one more, but this was a legacy performance from QB1.
Ooh.
Now, that is high praise from Louie, but, I mean, the accolades speak to themselves. So, I guess Jalen Hurts may not be the quality of quarterback that Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen are, but he has proven that he is clutch time in and time out for that team. And in the biggest games, he steps up and has his biggest performances. I want to see that on the biggest stage. And then, of course, you add in Saquon Barkley's historic season, A.J. Brown as a player, Devontae Adams as a player on defense, Jalen Carter and Quinyon Mitchell and Darius Slay. Zach Bond is the best linebacker in the NFL all of a sudden after being a cast-off who you know very well. Ross, like the one reason I believed in the Eagles all year is because they had so much star power. A lot of rosters are good, but a lot of rosters don't have these stars. And when the chips are down and when you're all in the pot, the stars make the big plays. So I want to see the most star-laden football team in the NFL take on the biggest star that matters, and that's Patrick Mahomes. And I'm sorry, I don't care about fatigue and played-out songs. This is a great, great football game, and I'm going to thoroughly enjoy watching it.
This reminds me of I say a few years ago. It's been several years now. But when the Jacksonville Jaguars had that miraculous postseason run, and there were a lot of people who wanted to see the Jacksonville Jaguars in the Super Bowl, I was on the other side. I was like, I really don't want to see the Jacksonville Jaguars in the Super Bowl because I don't think that would be a good game. Now, it's not like that Super Bowl ended up being a great Super Bowl anyway, but it reminds me very much of that. Like the Washington Commanders going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. Would that have just been a rout? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so I'm with you on all that. I wanted Washington and Buffalo because I wanted the story. I wanted the narratives. But hey, if you're looking for a good football game and the best quality football game you're going to get, you're probably getting it with the Chiefs and Eagles. But here's what I need the NFL to do. No more conversation about parity. It doesn't exist. There's no parity in the NFL. When teams are good, those teams are good. When teams are dynastic, those teams are dynastic. And the 32nd ranked team isn't all of a sudden going to stop that the very next season.
No, definitely not. And if you look at this year specifically compared to recent years, there was a very little middle class in the NFL this year, pointing exactly in that direction. But with that being said, what do the losers do from here? I think the Buffalo Bills have some clear upgrades they need, but not very easy to address them. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and a fantastic football game as well. And there's no better way to make every play even more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook, whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss. FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. The Super Bowl is truly the Super Bowl of betting, and not only that, but the live betting as well. And that's going on all game long at FanDuel. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field. The app is so easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5. And if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. All right, Ross, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about why the Super Bowl matchup is a great game. I was right. You were wrong. Nonetheless, we move forward with the show. Don't have time to continue bickering over it. But with that being said, we do got to look at the losers. It's time to focus on these losers, because what I have liked to do throughout this playoffs is kind of take a look back at the teams that lost and be like, what do they need to do going forward? And of course, that conversation starts with the Buffalo Bills, and the issues that the Bills have were on full display against the Chiefs, according to Joe Marino from Locked On Bills.
Kansas City goes 5-9 on third downs, 56%. Which is 12% higher than your normal rate. Can't get stops. Not enough of them. Why? Defensive play calling, I think, factors into that. Pass rush factors into that. Coverage factors into that. The Bills this year, 23rd in EPA defending the pass. We're talking about a bottom 10 pass defense. It's been a problem all year. It was a problem in this game. Patrick Mahomes had a success rate of 64.7% on dropbacks, which, oh, by the way, is the highest of his career, and a 99th percentile game in terms of dropback success rate.
Now, first and foremost, I agree with everything Joe's saying. They don't have a consistent pass rush when they need it. They don't have the game breaker. Now, they went and got Von Miller to be that, but he's too far along in his career to be that guy at this time. They have like a very good, solid defensive line. It's like a B+, but they don't have that one game changer like Kansas City has Chris Jones. You know what I mean? They just don't have that. They wanted Ed Oliver to be that, and he's not quite that. So then you go into the secondary, and I think their safeties really took a hit with, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer finally kind of aging out and them having to replace them. Taylor Rapp had a very good season, of course. DeMar Hamlin is just an okay player. It's a better story than he is a player out on the field. My thing is, Sean McDermott is a defensive guy. Not only that, he's a secondary guy. So if the problem, I saw a stat, and I wish I had it perfectly, but Josh Allen has scored nearly 30 points in all of these games where he's been knocked out in the playoffs, but his defense has just allowed more. And at the end of the day, Sean McDermott is a defensive guy and a secondary guy, first and foremost. If the defense has been the problem in all of these matchups and they just can't get the stops while Josh Allen is doing literally everything he can, do we have to have questions about Sean McDermott not being able to get the best out of the defense in the big moments? Like, at some point, if your biggest questions on your team are the things that make your coach special in theory, isn't that a problem?
Yeah, and I think you're looking at kind of the CEO approach and maybe where that might need to change for the Buffalo Bills, right? Does Sean McDermott need to get his hands a little bit dirtier with that defense, or do they need an adjustment in terms of what it is that their defensive coordinator is doing there and all those other pieces? I think you got to look at all of those things after a certain point. If the roster isn't being built the way that the roster needs to be built, i.e. player fit within the scheme and the system, you got to start looking at the people that are making those decisions as opposed to just looking at the players. So I think you're onto something there. The other thing that I think that would help Buffalo a lot, and I know the offense has not been the problem in these playoff exits, but to borrow a phrase that you used not too long ago, the Buffalo Bills play Moneyball at wide receiver. Just like you kind of need that guy that's going to be able to dominate and take over a game at the edge rusher spot, having a guy that can take over a game or that can turn your 1st and 10 into a 2nd and 5 or your 3rd and 2. Joe was talking about the inefficiencies on third down. you're not always going to be able to run for your 3rd and 2s, but who can you throw a quick slant to, quick out to, quick into, quick dig route to turn that 3rd and 2 into a 5-yard gain, right? And so who's that person, and where do the Buffalo Bills find that person? So Josh Allen and James Cook don't have to do it all because they have another one of those guys to rely on. They haven't had that player. I know they drafted Keon Coleman. They went out and they got Amari Cooper, but you're going to need somebody else to come in and play a more dominating role for Josh Allen at wide receiver.
You know who that player could have been, Ross? Xavier Worthy. But the Buffalo Bills traded down and didn't want him and took Keon Coleman instead, who had 1 catch for 12 yards in a very up and down rookie season for Keon Coleman, who I think can turn into a better player. Like, he's going to improve. But I mean, at the end of the day, is he the game changer that the speed of Xavier Worthy presents? And Buffalo's offense, Khalil Shakir is a very good slot wide receiver, a very good chain moving guy, but he doesn't have the deep game-breaking speed that Xavier Worthy does, and Amari Cooper didn't have that. We know Keon Coleman doesn't have that. That's a known thing coming out of college for him, that, you know, he wasn't going to be a game breaker. So they just don't have that vertical speed element in their offense that I think can open up things and make the passing game in the intermediate areas easier for Josh Allen. But I mean, they don't really have a lot of avenues to go to do any of this stuff. Game-changing players. They have late draft picks because of how far they went. It's not like that they have a ton of surplus cap space where they can go make a splash move. I think a trade probably is the only avenue. Maybe get veteran players right now. That might be their only path forward. But on the flip side of it, the Washington Commanders are a young team with young aspirations, where the Buffalo Bills are like exasperating their final, juice out of this version of the team. The Commanders are right at the start. And my guy David Harrison from Locked On Commanders talked about the hope that still remains for Washington going forward.
The main message first is you can never guarantee a team is going to go back to the NFC Championship game. You can never guarantee a team is going to go to the Super Bowl or go back to a Super Bowl once they've made it to one. And Dan Quinn knows that better than anybody, and certainly is feeling the pain of getting so close to getting back to that stage, getting the opportunity to not rewrite history, right? History is always going to be written, but the opportunity to add a chapter to that history, a better chapter, a better ending to one of those stories. But as long as Jaden Daniels stays healthy, and there's always that wild card of health, but as long as Jaden Daniels stay healthy, you Commanders fans, you're going to have way more opportunities to celebrate runs like this and to cheer your team on in playoff games with an expectation that your team is going to at least be competitive, if not flat out win. This isn't the end of the road for that. This is the end of the road for this season. Absolutely. It's not the end of the road for that.
I generally agree with David that the Commanders should remain hopeful, and this is the great start. But as I pointed out on yesterday's show, I will just say again, the NFL graveyard is littered with "we'll be back." So many teams think we'll be back. We have a young team. The Bengals never thought that they would be in the position that they were in
exactly
when they made their run. You know what I mean? Like the Jacksonville Jaguars, they came back on the Chargers, and Trevor Lawrence looked great, and they were competitive against the Chiefs, and we'll be back. And now they're picking top 5 in the NFL draft again. Like the NFL stands for not for long. There's no guarantee that the Commanders will be back. And I'll say one huge thing is, just like I pointed out after the game, when Cliff Kingsbury ultimately gets another head coaching gig, then what happens? We talk about the Bills. Do they need to maybe ditch Sean McDermott, bring in a veteran defensive coordinator, and maybe give the reins to Joe Brady before somebody else hires him? Do the Commanders need to consider that with Cliff Kingsbury? Because propping up that quarterback is the most important thing. Like these are tough calls that these teams probably won't make because it's a very bold move to do things like that, but they have to at least consider it.
Yeah. Look, and I will say this, going into next season, I don't think that there's a world. I guess I shouldn't say that there's not a world, but I don't see Cliff Kingsbury leaving. The only head coaching job that remains is the New Orleans Saints job. We're going to be discussing that here in a little bit.
This year.
I don't see Cliff Kingsbury going anywhere this year. So next year might be their best opportunity, right?
Yeah.
In the we're gonna be back situation. I think there's a lot of things that go right for Washington, that have gone right for Washington, obviously, but not without the work. They put in the work, they revamped that defense. Dan Quinn did a phenomenal job, coach of the year.
Yeah.
You've got the rookie of the year when it comes to your quarterback and Jaden Daniels. Now, can you build that offensive line so that the offensive line isn't just being bailed out by Jaden Daniels' legs? Can you turn Jaden Daniels into a more efficient passer by allowing him more time to pass, right? He can do all the magical things with his legs. That's excellent. Don't take that out of his game. But can you allow him to also be what he also is, which is an efficient quarterback as well? Can you continue to build that defense? Can you rebuild your defensive line after that talent left over the course of the past couple of years? Things like that continue to add there. I think it's clear the paths that are there. And I think Washington has more readily available assets to get it done than Buffalo does, right? So I think that there's a lot. And I think that's just what happens when you have the rookie quarterback on the rookie deal that's already playing at this level. They have exactly what they need to continue their success.
A lot more wiggle room for sure. And Adam Peters looking like a great executive there in Washington. So I expect him to make some solid moves. But we talked about Joe Brady with the Buffalo Bills. Is Ross going to talk about Joe Brady with the Buffalo Bills? Let's get the finalists of the New Orleans Saints head coaching job right now. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. And that is where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. Post your job. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder over 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Ross, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. We've talked about the Super Bowl matchup. We've talked about the losers from this weekend's games. Now, I want to, flex the muscle that we got here on the show today. We do have not only a Locked On NFL expert, but our Locked On Saints expert, the mastermind Ross Jackson. And with the New Orleans Saints being the only team that doesn't have a head coach, feel like it would be a good opportunity to get caught up on who exactly the Saints are looking at even. And then on tomorrow's show with Luke Braun, we're going to talk about who we think is the best fit and leave Ross out of that conversation. He's in the trenches, folks. And you never know what you're going to get. But before we dive in, thanks again for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Make sure that you check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins in the barbershop. He's going to have a ton of great commentary on all of this NFL news that we discussed today, too. I am sure of it. But Ross, who are, in your mind, the finalists for this New Orleans Saints head coaching job?
Yeah, well, as of right now, there's 4, and then maybe a possibility. As of right now, there's 4. And to your point, Joe Brady, the optics not great for New Orleans. Joe Brady going back to Buffalo, saying, I'm not leaving Buffalo. He withdrew from consideration for the New Orleans Saints head coaching job. So here's why that's important, Tyler. Right. It's not a good look. And here's why it's not a good look. It's not about the remaining candidate list, because there are still some solid candidates for New Orleans. But what it is Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator from the Detroit Lions, who took the job with the New York Jets, former New Orleans Saints defensive backs coach, didn't even give the Saints an in-person interview. Didn't even come to the great city of New Orleans, right? Before making his decision. Then Joe Brady, former offensive assistant, 2017, 2018 in New Orleans, he ends up not even giving the New Orleans Saints an in-person interview before saying, I'm taking another open job, but I'm staying where I am. Not a great look for New Orleans, right? Really, really
No.
tough. So really, to me, it's about that. The finalists for New Orleans are the only people who have interviewed so far
All right.
in person, excuse me. And that would be Anthony Weaver, defensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins.
Yep.
Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator and assistant head coach for the New York Jets. Interim head coach from last season, from the last 8 games of the year, Darren Rizzi, special teams coach, one of the best special teams coaches in the NFL. Let me give him his flowers. And then the expectation is that the Saints will have interviewed Kellen Moore, offensive coordinator from the Philadelphia Eagles as well. They plan to fly to Philly to get that interview done. So those are the 4 finalists, and the only ones that I can put as finalists for New Orleans, because they're the only ones that have done in-person interviews. There's still kind of the hanging chad, if you will, around Mike McCarthy. Will he, won't he? So we'll see where that goes. If he interviews, I think that he becomes a favorite for sure. But the Saints effectively have a tier of 4 favorites that could walk away with this job at any point.
Ross, I got to tell you, that's an uninspiring list.
Yep.
I will be honest. I don't think. And I guess the question immediately becomes, why is this job so unattractive?
Yeah, look, I think $52 million over the salary cap going into 2025. I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal because they're going to be $60 million under the salary cap in 2026, 220 plus under the salary cap in 2021. So the light is there at the end of the tunnel, right? In terms of getting out of the salary cap situation. Now, those numbers are going to move based upon what the actual salary cap ends up being versus projections. And there will be some accelerations, deferments, things like that in present contracts that will impact that. But it's a pretty good assumption of where the trajectory is headed for New Orleans. So for me, it was like, oh, okay, well then that new head coach all of a sudden gets a year of patience, right? There's no quarterback. Right. There's also no standing long-term option at quarterback for New Orleans on the roster. And when I say long-term option at quarterback, my criteria for that is a quarterback on a rookie contract with multiple years of starting experience. The Saints don't have that, right? Or you'd already have to be at the place where you're into like a second contract with a guy. In neither case is New Orleans in, right?
Yeah,
Derek
it doesn't
Carr,
matter. It's not that. Yeah.
Derek Carr might be the guy for 2025. That's going to depend upon who the head coach is and what they want. He's probably not going to be the guy in 2026. Jake Haener, Spencer Rattler, the 2 young guys. Maybe a coach wants to work with him. Maybe a coach doesn't. You know what I mean? You don't know. We have no idea. Yeah. And so I think those are 2 of the big reasons why New Orleans right now is struggling to find somebody, is because that's what the situation is. And that's what they have to offer. General manager Mickey Loomis says that he doesn't have to sell, doesn't feel like he has to sell. You got to sell, dude. Like, you got to find some way to sell this. Whether it's selling a 3-year vision or whether it's selling right now. I think the 3-year vision is probably a more effective sell, but you got to be willing to sell something. So those are the 3 things that I think are kind of the keys here.
It's crazy because the commentary is always, well, there's only 32. Why would anybody take this job with this and that? Well, there's only 32 in the world. And with supply, demand, that means that people are going to want it. But I am a bit shocked at, I guess, we don't know if it's New Orleans' choice to not interview more candidates or maybe names that maybe seem a little bit better. And of course, nobody thought Dan Quinn was a great hire, and then they go as far as they did this year. So who's to say that who the New Orleans Saints hire isn't actually the best hire and they didn't get one of the best hires of the cycle? But I guess it is pretty wild to me. When do you think, I know this is kind of tough to answer, but when do you think we'll get some finality on this? After the Super Bowl, after they interview Kellen Moore? Do you think there's any way they could pull the trigger before?
Yeah, I think we're getting close. I mean, I think it's sometime late this week, or it's pretty close to after the Super Bowl that this happens, right? There's the interview with Kellen Moore that's on the way, or that might be completed
this
actually,
week, right? Because they have the bye.
Happen. Yep, absolutely. The expectation was that they were going to fly to go and see him on early in the week. So, but who knows? By the time that we're done with this, they could be there at his house, knocking on the door. Hey, buddy, want a job? You know what I mean? The only thing that they can't do is The only thing that they can't do is make the hire official until after the Super Bowl when it comes to Kellen Moore. That would be the only thing. And then the expectation is that after they visit with Kellen Moore, that they will be interested in visiting with Mike McCarthy. There's mutual interest there. I just don't know how deep that mutual interest runs on both sides. So I think right after that, you get the opportunity then for the New Orleans Saints to say, okay, this is our person. And so I think we could hear about it this week, whether it's a, hey, the Saints are expected to hire Kellen Moore, or it's a, hey, they've agreed to terms with Mike McCarthy or Anthony Weaver and things like that. So we'll see exactly which way it all goes for him. But I do think the timeline, we're getting very, very close to that announcement happening.
Oh, we're only like a couple weeks out of Valentine's Day, and the Saints are trying to find their person.
Trying to find their
how
Valentine,
romantic.
yeah.
But what I'll say is this is just my read of it. And obviously, your
Mhm.
boots on the ground, but this is what it seems like to me. It seems like we want to hire Kellen Moore, so we're not hiring any of these guys that we've talked to already. We're going to go talk to Kellen Moore. If he is not interested after that first interview, we'll pivot to Mike McCarthy. And if they hire or if they do get Kellen Moore to say yes during their interview, they want to say yes, it's a partnership, then we won't hear anything until after the Super Bowl. And if we don't hear anything in the next week after they talk to Kellen Moore, then it's probably he got the job and they just can't announce it until after the Super Bowl. So
I think that's a very
not
solid
saying that's
assessment.
perfect, but right. But
Yeah.
I guess that's generally what you should expect if you're looking for some finality and some answers with this coaching move. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. The Super Bowl matchup is set. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot more about that in the next few weeks. But tomorrow, probably talk about some of these coaching hires that have happened already. But with that being said, that's going to do it for me, your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, the Mastermind, Ross Jackson. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. Thanks for tuning in to Locked On NFL. And as I tell you every episode, stay safe out there.